And this is a perfect example of why we have our solar system. Everybody else in the RV park is without power right now. So it's eating up space or eating up money, one or the other. When it comes to 12 volts, why didn't we go 48 volts? Wouldn't 48 volt be better than 24 volts? Today, guys, we're going to be talking about 24 volt inverter system and why I think it's the best for a 50 amp RV and why we are getting rid of our 50 amp RV cord. And we're going to explain all the pros and cons and exactly what we're talking about, RV solar, boondocking, and so much more. So stick around, check it out. Hey guys, if you're new to the channel, I'm Chris. This is the Salty Trips channel, and we are living in our fifth wheel RV full time with my wife and our 3 puppies. We have built a pretty stout 24 volt inverter system in this RV to run everything that we need to for off-grid use and for emergencies. And I'll go into more detail about what I'm talking about as far as emergencies. But first, we're going to go over all the things that I believe the Victron inverter 24 volt 2x120 inverter, the best inverter for a 50 amp RV. All right, I want to assume that most of you guys understand the basics of DC power and electricity and how volts times amps equals watts. And if you're going to have the same amount of watts and you change the volts or amps, they're transversely affected. So if you have more volts, you need less amps for the same amount of watts, as if you had lower volts, you would need higher amps for the same amount of watts. Like if you had 12 volts at 10 amps, that's 120 watts. But 24 volts at 10 amps, that's 240 watts. So I'm going to assume you guys understand that. If you're not really sure, I have a video kind of explaining the basics of RV electricity and how all this stuff works. So I'll leave that link down in the description area below. You can go watch that and then come back to here. There's a couple reasons why we went with the 24 volt system instead of the 12 volt system. With the 12 volt system, especially when you're running a lot of inverter power, and like we actually started out very small at the beginning. When we started this thing, we only had one inverter, 3000 watt inverter, what's a VA, which is 2400 watts of actual running power, but it can max up to 3000 watts. But we started off with that and one battery, no solar. And then the system grew and grew and grew. Now we have 2 24 volt 3000 watt inverters running parallel, and we have 4 24 volt 200 amp hour batteries. That's 800 amp hours, a 24 volt, but if you want to convert that to 12 volt, that's like 1600 amp hours of 12 volt power. That's 20,000, over 20,000 watt hours of power that we can use in our entire RV. And we, like I said, we started off with no solar. Now we have over 3,200 watts of solar on the roof, and we have expandable where we can mount them outside for extra 400 watts wherever we need to. So now we got a little bit of backstory about what we've kind of been through. We got the 24 volt system because it uses a lot less amperage for the same amount of power as you would need for a 12 volt system. Like I said, you know, if you double the voltage, you can cut the amps in half for the same amount of power that you need for a 12 volt system. Like if you're running a 3000 watt inverter, you need 4-aught cable, which is about the size of my thumb. And if you're running this for the same amount of wattage, you only need to run a 2-aught cable for 24 volt system, which the cable is probably about the size of my pinky. Less copper means it costs you less. When you're running all these wires and stuff like that, it costs a lot less to run the wires. You do save some money on lugs, on wire, and just the fact of the thickness, it's so much easier to work with and bend and maneuver around a 2-aught cable than a 4-aught cable. The higher current with the 12 volt system, especially running a bigger system like we have, then if you have any choke points, like there's a bad crimp or just a bad connection or something like that, you want to make sure that's all great, because any kind of resistance creates heat, and heat creates what? Fire. We figured it'd be a little safer running the 24 volt system, even though people run 12 volt systems all the time and never have any fires. As long as you do things right, you should be just fine. With the inverter taking 24 volts and converting it to 120 volt AC power to run all our AC equipment like TV, microwave. In our case, we have a residential refrigerator, the air conditioning units, the electric furnace, and all of our outlets all work off of our two inverters. So if we got a lot of stuff running, that is a lot of current. And on 12 volts, it's double the current as it would be with 24 volts. But if you're looking at the inverters at a price point, the 12 volt and 24 volt inverters are close to the same price. Sometimes you can find one cheaper than the other on sale. They go up and down, but they're about the same price. So you don't really save any money on that. But because the 24 volt uses less current than the 12 volt does, it creates less heat. Like we have our 24 volt inverters in our front compartment where there's no air conditioning, nothing like that. I've seen so many times on other channels where people have been concerned about their 12 volt systems, especially if they're running two inverters, overheating. A lot of them have actually set up like exhaust fans that get triggered by temperature sensor in there to keep that area cool. So far, we have the Govee temperature sensors, and I have one sitting in there, and I can track it with my phone all the time. And I check on it, especially with both inverters running and running heavy loads. It hardly ever gets above ambient temperature where all that equipment is. And the 24 volt 3000 VA 2x120 Multiplus 2 is specifically designed for 50 amp RVs. The 50 amp has a 4-wire connection. It has L1, neutral, L2, and a ground. Unlike most of the traditional inverters, only have one power, neutral, and a ground. When I refer to L1 and L2 on the 50 amp, that's leg 1 and leg 2, which each carries 50 amp of current into your RV at 120 volt AC power. And these inverters are specifically designed for that, to just pass through. When you connect it, you connect the line that comes from shore that goes into your inverter, back out to your inverter, and then to your breaker box. And under normal operation, it just passes straight through there. You can have the inverter charge your batteries, keep them charged when you're hooked up to shore power, and it will just act like it's not there, and you can just run your 50 amp RV however you want. But it also does have the power assist mode too, where like if you're hooked to a 30 amp service and you want to run two ACs in your microwave, 30 amps not going to cut it. The Victron inverter will pick up the slack and provide the extra power you need to run your RV on 30 amps shore power like it's on 50 amp service. They do have a 12 volt version that does the exact same thing, but like I said before, it requires a lot more current to run the load than it would for a 24 volt system, which cuts that in half, which means smaller wire, which is easier to handle and costs less. Which now brings us to the solar part of the situation. Like our first solar install, we put 2,500 watts of solar on our roof. And if we had a 12 volt system, we would have to use two charge controllers. And the charge controller is the device that takes the solar voltage and current and drops the voltage down and then increases the current so that it will match your batteries. If I have 6 of like the panels we have now, 250 watts, I think it's going to be about 100 volts at a little over 10 to 15 amps going down to your charge controller. And your charge controller takes those volts and amps and crams it down to about 27 volts, 27.5, 28 volts to charge your 24 volt batteries. And when it lowers the voltage, of course, it increases the amperage. That is the limiting factor on most of these MPPT charge controllers. As you see the second number on it, it says like this one is 150, 100. That 100 means it's a maximum of 100 amps output. Okay, so we have 2,500 watts of solar on the roof. And if we had a 12 volt system, dropping all that voltage down to 14 volts to charge the 12 volt batteries would increase the amperage by double versus what we would need for a 24 volt system. So in order to run 2,500 watts of solar on the roof, we would need 2 of these charge controllers. And one of these charge controllers is like $500. So if I had a 12 volt system, it would cost me $1,000 as opposed to $500 to run the same amount of wattage on the roof if I had a 12-volt system instead of a 24-volt system. And this has two bonuses. The fact that it just cuts your price in half, and it saves space, because 2 charge controllers, you need space for 2 charge controllers. And if you've been following along, we actually now have 3 charge controllers because we have 3 different arrays. We have one array that's 2,500 watts. We added a second solar array that's 720 watts. And then we have our third array that we finally added recently, deployable solar panels that we can put wherever we need to get the best extra little bit of juice that we need. So if we had a 12-volt system, we would either need 6 of those charge controllers, or like on the smaller ones, we could have got a larger charge controller, which would have cost probably about double anyway. So it's eating up space or eating up money, one or the other, when it comes to 12 volt. And honestly, if you only plan to ever just run something small, you're less than 3,000 watt inverter, less than like 1,000 watts of solar on the roof, yeah, 12 volt might just be the easiest way to go, because then you can connect it to the rest of your system and it all just runs off of 12 volt. And that brings up the other big question I get is, what do you do? Because all the lights and everything, some refrigerators in the RVs all run on 12 volts, and the jacks and the slide outs all run on 12 volts. We installed 24 volt to 12 volt Orion Victron converters in parallel, which is 2 of them and stacked on each other, which each of them is capable of putting out 70 amps at 12 volts. Well, technically, it can do a range of 9 volts all the way up to 15 volts, and it has a little knob that you can adjust it to that. And we have it set right at 14 volts. So we have constant 14 volt power all the time, and it never fluctuates no matter what the state of our batteries are. So we were able to get rid of our lead acid batteries, 12 volt batteries, the big heavy batteries, and that allowed us to take that weight we lost and add more 24 volt lithium power, which has been working out great. And so the next question is, well, if 24 volt is that much better than 12 volt, wouldn't 48 volt be better than 24 volt? And we get that asked a lot, like, why didn't we go 48 volts? With the 12 volt versus 48 volts, yeah, you're going to save money on wire. You're going to need less charge controllers and smaller charge controllers to run a 48 volt system, which will save you money. But here's the big thing that I don't think a lot of people know, is they don't make a 24 volt 2x120, which means it's not designed for a 50 amp RV with the 4 wires. It only has 3 wires, which you would have to then, if you ran 2, run in a split phase, which I'm not interested in doing. I like the parallel, because like if you ran 2 inverters in split phase, that means you would have one leg go into one inverter and the other leg go into the other inverter, and they just run that half of the panel each. So let's say you have on leg 2, one air conditioner is running, and let's say on leg 2, the microwave and the outlet in the bedroom are all on the same leg 2, and you just have run inverter. My wife is blow drying her hair and the air conditioner is running. I pretty much maxed out that inverter. If I kicked on the microwave, or I wanted to make a cup of coffee, whatever, I needed more juice, I've already maxed out that inverter. And same thing with L1. If the air conditioner is on here, you have the air fryer going, or whatever, it's a lot easier to max out single inverters by themselves. But if you have them run in parallel, both inverters work together, so that 3,000 watt inverters turns into a 6,000 watt VA inverters, which each can run 24 watts consistently for 4,800 watts, but it can max out at 6,000 watts. Like if it's spiked, it won't overload if you're just for a short time and came back down to 4,800 watts. So I can run 2 air conditioners, blow dryer, the TV, and pretty much anything we need to all at the same time without overloading any inverters and stuff like that. So basically the single reason why we didn't get the 48 volt system was because they did not make a 48 volt 2x120 Multiplus. And that's it. If they did, we probably would go to that, but they don't make it, so we're sticking with 24 volt. Ideally, I would love to see them make a 6000 VA 48 volt 2x120 and just have one single inverter to do everything, so you didn't have to run two. But actually, I reached out to the people at Victron, and it sounds like they have no plans on doing that. But that would be the perfect solution for a 50 amp RV. But they don't make it, so it is what it is. And then we get asked, well, why did you get such a big system? But not long after we started full-time RV living, going from park to park, did we realize that a lot of these parks, their power grids have issues. Either sometimes during storms, power goes out, or we've had 3 outlets go bad on us, and we've had to have them replaced. And when that happened, and we live in Florida, and it gets hot, and we have these 2 guys that don't do well in the heat. So we were concerned, and I have another YouTube channel that is fishing, and I'm offshore fishing a lot. If I'm 10, 15 miles offshore and Kim's at work, one of these outlets go bad or the power goes out, and we have 2 ACs running. If we only had 1 inverter, I don't think I mentioned that too, but the Victron inverters, if you ever lose shore power, it will automatically take over and provide power to your RV until either your batteries run out or shore power comes back on. If we had 1 inverter and we had 2 air conditioners running, it would overload that inverter. The big thing for us was we want 2 inverters to make sure that if both ACs are running in the middle of summer and the puppies are home alone, that the ACs will keep running and they will be safe. The other option too is people say, well, why don't you just get like the waggle alert that will tell you if the temperature's gone up or you lose power and stuff like that. I don't get a cell signal offshore, and Kim can't always leave work. But this way, we know for sure that if the power goes out, our AC, refrigerator, everything stays working nonstop until the batteries are drained. And we have a lot of batteries. And if the sun's out, we have a lot of solar that's going to keep running for a long time. So basically, these guys are the reason why we have such a big system. And it kind of just grew from there. And then it kind of grew into well, we can just go anywhere we want and live how we want. All right, it's been a couple days since I finished that video, and this is a perfect example of why we have our solar system and our inverters, and everybody else in the RV park is without power right now. I guess it's been out for quite a while, and I was in there editing fishing videos and doing laundry with the air conditioner running, and I had no idea that the power even went out. My wife actually texted me and told me that she saw on Facebook that the park power was out. So that's how I found out that there's no power in this whole thing, and we're the only ones still running the air conditioner, doing laundry. Supposedly we're not going to get power till like way later tonight. I think somebody hit a power pole or something down the street or something like that, but it's just out in this whole area. Come on, let's go back in the air conditioning. Get back in the air conditioning. That's right, Fannies. That's right, buddies. So now we're going to get to why exactly are we going to get rid of our 50 amp cord? Why don't we need it anymore? As I explained before, this has the Victron inverters have the power assist ability, so that if you have less shore power coming in, it will make up the difference. And a couple of months back, we actually got our 50 to 30 amp adapter and plugged into the 30 amp service. And then with the Victron inverter, with 2 in parallel, you're able to go into the system and limit the amount of how much you want input coming in. So we have it limited down to 18.5 amps, which is a little over 2,000 watts. So we're never going to pull more than 2,000 watts from the pedestal. And if you're at a spot that charges you electricity, if you're paying month to month, some of these places do, you can supplement by using solar power and your batteries to run the rest of your RV, and only pulling that minimum of 18.5 amps from your shore power, and the system will pick up the rest. And we've also been running it in Victron has a system called sustain mode. I had another video about that, and that is where it basically shuts that off the charging from your Victron inverter, so your inverters don't charge your batteries, and you only get your batteries charged from solar. But there's one caveat to that. Once a week, the sustain mode will automatically kick on your inverter chargers and will charge up the batteries to 100%. But whenever I see that kick on, I usually just turn it off because most of the time the solar will charge up my batteries to 100% quite often enough where I don't need the shore power to do it for me. And we've been consistently running on that 30 amp service at 18.5 input limit for 5 months now with zero issues. It has not been a problem at all. So I'm thinking, you have a 50 amp cord that has 4 wires in it that are 6 gauge each, when I could have a 30 amp cord with only 3 wires in it and 10 gauge each, which is a lot thinner, lighter, and more maneuverable. You all know we have 50 amp cords, those, especially if they've been out in the sun a lot, they get stiff, and then you got somewhere to put it. So if I only had a 30 amp cord, then I would save space, save weight, and I really don't need 50 amp anymore. Solar and batteries provide anything extra I need off a 30 amp service. So if you're finding this stuff interesting or you got questions, make sure you're subscribed and got your notification bell on. Leave comments below. Let me know what you think. We appreciate you guys following along. And those are our reasons why I believe 24 volt Victron inverter 2x120s are superior to almost anything else out there. And like I said, we started out with one and one battery, and the thing is it's expandable. You can keep going more and more until you're satisfied. So I hope that kind of explains everything. If you're still a little bit confused, we have a playlist of our complete build from beginning to end, all the steps we took to get from one inverter and one battery to here. So if you want to check that out, I will leave that playlist linked in the description below, and you can have a ball. And if you have any questions, leave it down in the comment section below. I will do my best to answer it. Thanks for coming along, guys. Subscribe, notification bell, all that fancy jazz. Give this video a big thumbs up. Shows us you appreciate the content because we appreciate you guys. And hopefully we'll see you guys in the next video. Till then, see you later.